And in this desperate circle in which I find myself, alone, it's not myself I find at all. It's just a cubicle that's silent, that is true. And yet, these voices in my head make of this place a pinball game that's full of echoes. I am a god here. And that is true as well, but I'm a Gnostic sort of god, a demiurge that seeks destruction. I am a bad god who rejoices in my evil, and yet I take it out on no one, just myself, and in my mind, and in my sleep, and in my fantasies of vengeance, which are cruel beyond imagining, and when examined, on reflection, cause a violent wish to puke, which has happened on occasion, when I've swallowed my own vomit in disgust at my own wishes. But what is more, it's all the others. It is they that are so frightfully atrocious that the thought of being near them, much less being forced to listen to the drivel which they foist upon their company of listeners, who can find no place to which they can retreat, except for vats all full of arsenic and hydrochloric acid, which then boil in their pall. Entrails, ending up as thoughts of murder, of which they ought to disabuse themselves, not relish. Yet they do. There's very little that can give them near the pleasure that the fantasy of ripping all those cretins quite apart does, if not with words, then with utensils they have sharpened in their kitchens, while they cooked up lethal dinners to be served to all the morons whom they're forced to tolerate. But not for long, for they retreat into their cubicles of silence, and are deafened by their longing, and their lifelong disappointments and betrayals, which have made of them these mangled and exhausted things, who find their only solace in their cubicles of silence. I'm in mine now. Where are you? I'm only asking to be polite, for the truth is, I don't give a tinker's damn about you, and wouldn't care if you were crushed upon some train track and were left a paraplegic. Just so long as there remained no chance I'd end up in some room in which you happen to be staying, holding forth, as is your custom, on a multitude of subjects, concerning which you've not a shred of information. You pompous blowhard, can you please just have a stroke? We'd all be much obliged. We would applaud. And then we'd stuff you in the fireplace and turn your bloated corpse to ash, while we roasted sweet potatoes and discussed the final volume of Remembrance of Things Past, which was authored by a man whose mind was quite as diseased as yours. But that's a very different story, and he isn't here at present, being dead these many years. And, heaven help us, we are not the sorts of folks who roam about in deepest night, and who rob graves outside of Paris, not to mention all his bones have not a shred of flesh upon them, hardly suitable for roasting sweet potatoes, which, as you know, is our intention. Have you died yet? That's the main thing. Please don't tarry. We've got lots and lots to do. And, by the way, and speaking only for myself, I'm not the least bit fond of yams. The main thing that's worth noting is that my life's completely miserable. There are several rooms inside my head worth visiting, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. But nonetheless, there's this appalling isolation which I cannot drive away. For to do so would require me to not become impatient with how purely idiotic I find all I see and hear, and, God forbid, all to whom I'm forced to listen, there's nothing for it but to run back to my cubicle, a sort of Führerbunker, which, luckily for me, contains no Joe or Magda Goebbels, or their snot-nosed little brats, no Eva either, though a dumb, adoring blonde might be rather helpful in my case. But, good heavens, not one who's dumber than a bratwurst. Thank goodness cubicles akin to the one in which I find myself now come equipped with links to porn sites. So I used to think at one time, but these days I find them all so very boring, so pathetic, that I can't be even bothered. It's just my God-forsaken cock, for goodness sake, and what of that? Or, rather, what to make of him? Don't I have better things to do than look at pigs with tits of silicone and brains made out of jello, high on coke, and, as a rule, all headed straight for early death? How much better to play music for the virginal upon the piano, though it's entirely inappropriate. Honestly, it's awful. Completely wrong, but I don't care. What I really care about is coughing up some new idea, but it's been ages since I've done so. I'm all spent, there's nothing left, there's nothing for it. The situation of my spirit quite resembles the condition of my cock. I am that tattered coat which sits upon a frame which sports a tattered stick, which has no function any more, is just a nuisance, more or less like I am. This self that watches from behind my eyes, the one those greasy swamis with their orange duds assert, is what I am. That self, that watcher, who's revolted by that other self as much as by my cock, which are both impotent appendages, needless to say. But what about my bladder and my prostate? Though the latter's good for nothing, as of late. In fact, they're both just weird accretions to a house of bones that's crumbling, the prostate, an appendage that's quite certain that its singing and its clapping days are over. The best it does these days is grimace, and to wish it could at last escape the body, leave all the bones on which it hangs in a heap upon some sidewalk where some poorly paid custodian might come and sweep them up. If he's not crumbled into dust before he does so, which is a reasonable hypothesis, though quite beside the point, at least for now. For if the prayer this stinking soul now utters finds its way up to some heaven, which is foolish, there's no heaven, to some bastard of a god who's feeling generous, that's more plausible. Methinks, perhaps he'll yank me through some tunnel for a pleasant game of blackjack with some geriatric players like myself. I just hope he's taken care to make quite sure they're not as stupid as the average set of kvetchy, grizzled, half-demented geezers one encounters as a rule. No, this won't do. The thing is, I must disappear as if I'd never been. That's what I've always begged for, and it's what I yearn for now. I only need to happen on some calling card of this or that exhausted demiurge, who at the moment hasn't anything to do, and would be willing then to grant me the oblivion I seek, the one I've sought since long ago. That thing, that monster, who has me popped out of nothing into a world I never thought could be this awful. But, alas, such is my fate, and the only things that seem to still remain to me consist of all these prayers to minor gods I am quite sure do not exist. So barring that, I may break down on sleepless nights and turn to Pornhub or to Gibbons or to Bird. Perhaps I'll hear tell of some book of which it's been said might offer me some pleasant sort of explosion in my brain, which is so famished, which is dying of starvation. Truth to tell, unlike my cock, which is purely atavistic at this late date, purely vestigial, more or less a thing of horror, which reminds me that now and then I need pay it attention, or I'll die of my insomnia in my cubicle, where at least I am assured that I'll be safe. But safe for what? For more of this? This is god-awful. Perhaps I ought now take a walk, but that won't do. For when I walk, there may be people. Oh, the horror! What is worse than other people? Which serves then to remind me how depressed I'd always be just after fucking, how I'd want to die, or, barring that, to murder the repulsive piece of meat which was then lying by my side, spouting lies, gushing promises, professing bullshit, full of sweat and foully reeking. And that voice! Dear God, that voice! Hell is the cackle of the woman you've just fucked. The only honesty's in solitude, nothing else is bearable. For the moment there's someone else, some other person, one then falls right through the earth into a pit of fire and brimstone and of monumental boredom, and the threat that all this filth might be eternal, that there neither will nor can be any exit, and that any sweetness in one's nerves or in one's joints needs must be followed by a pain so huge and vast that it's as if one is a cavern, nay, a canyon, full of hydrothermal poisons on which one's gagging, in which I'm gagging. There are no windows in this room. This cubicle, which I have fashioned out of hatred, lust, and sadness, has no windows. And it's shrinking now. How could I not have noticed it is shrinking? I've not long. What can I do? They say a man's last thoughts are great, that they're profound, but that's absurd. All I'm aware of is the violent need to shit, and how I wish that I had said more vicious words to that fishwife with whom I spent the latter half of my existence. It should be she who's being squashed, like the dog shit that I stepped in on the way to this apartment. It's too late. She's probably busy reading chick lit, watching rom-coms while eating chocolate. Had I simply thought to tell her what she was, what she had done, or, better still, to slit her throat, then I would welcome, I'd congratulate these walls about to squash me. I would fall upon my knees and genuflect in acts of homage. I'd express my gratitude in countless sonnets. Well, perhaps there'd be no time for countless sonnets, but a few. There is no question I could generate a few. It's not hard to write a bad one. Surely walls are not good critics. They'd be grateful for the effort. It's the thought that really counts that is a given. It's somewhat hard to breathe at present, hence might be a challenge to recite them. Nonetheless, this is a good thing. I've always wanted nothing more from life than being able to create a fresh, newfangled thing of one sort or another. These are strange thoughts to be having in my last most cherished moments, which have never, ever been the least bit treasured, not a one. So why start now? Oh dear, this hurts. Will I be nothing but a postage stamp-sized bit of former flesh, the molecules of which will now be smashed together, be made nothing, with no space for their reflection in some mirror which I'm glad I do not have, for it would show me as I am? Is that a cricket? I think it is, and it seems to me a healthy little bugger and quite friendly. Well, so much then for all the fools who say we're doomed to die alone.